RLCraft, the hardest mod pack in all of Minecraft. What a joy. In this mod pack, the world is full of dragons, ghosts and ghouls and everything spooky scary that can and will take your life. The world is a truly dangerous landscape, littered with dungeons, battle towers and so many more truly challenging feats to tackle. In this series, I'll be attempting to survive 100 days in RLCraft. Day 1. I awoke in the green fields. I'd been sleeping on the floor, homeless. I had a motivation to get things in motion, so I began collecting rocks on the ground and desperately scavenging for any resources I possibly could. The world was full of danger, demonic entities, wild animals, everything was working in synergy against me. I journeyed to the nearby lake to collect some of the gravel and stone at its surface. This was to acquire flint. I also went foraging for leaves from bushes to break them down into sticks, the most humble of resources required to create some makeshift tools for myself. I made a flint knife, a blade that I used to pick nearby grass, and used for plant fiber to weave some string. Thirst was setting in. I could hear the howls of the wolves in the night and I was parched, my vision slowly waning, playing tricks on my mind and leaving me vulnerable to the dangers of the cover of night. With the resources I sourced, I created a flint hatchet. Day 2. My new tools let me fell some trees in the forest so I could use the lumber later to build a home. I also created a crafting bench so I could get to work, further fleshing out a structure to use as a tool shed. The rocks that I picked from the forest floor let me form cobblestone, which I then used to create a stone pickaxe and a stone sword for some protection, as well as an improved stone axe. I began to carve out what would later become a mine directly below my abode, so I could find resources with less risk. This let me acquire some coal deposits. I carved some logs and used some of the wood from earlier to make a chest for storage, having collected an abundance of loot thus far. But I needed food to quell my hunger and set me up for later, so being the monster I was, I unfortunately had to slay some cows. But life as an adventurer was becoming lonesome. I used some bones to pet a wolf in the forest, an animal who would become man's best friend, my loyal pet, a dog that I would train and bring as my companion on my journeys, a much needed protector for the dangers of the forest. Day 3. The third day was for hunter-gathering. I made it my mission here to get more food, but I also stumbled into pixies of the forest, who would laugh and torment me from nearby, but I would of course attempt to put an end to their infestation in the woods. Day 4. But the pixies would follow me from the woods for revenge, entering my home. It was at times like this that I was thankful to have my dog. The woods are an unforgiving place of dark magics after all. I farmed some chickens for meat, feathers and eggs, carefully trying to keep out of the shadows of the forest where a lack of darkness presented increased danger. Skeleton skull idols and strange insidious decorations I witnessed put a chilling feeling in my spine, all littered throughout the forest in the open fields. I would make sure to stay hydrated though, as the thirstier I became, the more my vision lacked. Any deeper and I would probably go into psychosis, which perhaps explained my mass slaying of pigs after the fact. This was my first experience seeking out a mossy tower in the forest edge, a seemingly abandoned structure that ended up housing spiders, zombies and various other monstrosities, but a ton of loot nonetheless. I went from floor to floor, cleaning out the enemies, breaking their spawners and stacking up my loot exponentially faster than before, perhaps my quickest sum of progression thus far. From leather to chainmail, I found such a heavy accumulation of goods seemingly quickly, but these towers were no breeze. They were flooded with beasts from top to bottom. Now, I underestimated how much of a godsend this place was. I sourced diamond gear insanely early on in my adventure, which would make things a little bit easier. Day 5. I returned with my spoils of war, feeding my chests a healthy flurry of goods. I had diamond, iron and leather armor by this point, a nice mix and match of fashion. With my newfound goods and riches, I assigned much of the time of this day to strip down wooden logs, break down some of my ore veins into blocks of ore and other monotonous tasks. I also made it a key task to expand out my base to upscale my new life in the forest, making my house slightly more impressive. However, alas, I was ambushed in the dark by a bird of terror from the skies, attempting to eliminate me and starve me of my newfound progress. And it wasn't alone. I of course made quick work of these predators. I had to send a message that I was not to be messed with. The weak fear the strong after all. I also made a bed. I could now sleep during the night and sleep through all of the potential threats. A shortcut of course, although it wouldn't wipe away nightmares of what I'd seen. Day 6. I advanced some of my skills, becoming more adept by this point due to my experience. My sword skills were fair, but one thing I was lacking was defense, and my blocking skills with a sword were my weakness. I crafted a shield, something that would hopefully come in use if I was attacked once more, which momentarily I was by invading foes foes, more magical enemies that raided my base. I had to fix the weak points in my house to prevent this from happening again. Now I knew some of these mystical creatures could negate all physical limitations of blocks and barricades, and teleport through walls. Not something with an easy solution, however. I made some paper from sugarcane I had acquired, and some wooden slabs, and made them into a matchbox. This would be useful for making torches, as well as creating a campfire that I could use as a light source for the nighttime darkness. After all, the darkness attracts some less than stellar company. Also, lesson learnt the hard way: don't walk onto an open flame or fire pit. Thank me later. Day 7. I made some more storage containers in my new extension. I was gathering more and more loot, a lot of it meaningless, and sorting wasn't something I'd even bothered to do yet, not something I'd recommend. I continued my mining efforts, finding some better ores this time, like iron. I found myself in a deep, seemingly never-ending cave system, and nothing could go wrong here, right? It seemed like I'd already hit the jackpot when already finding diamond, so this seemed fruitless. I also cooked some food in my furnace, so hopefully I'd not have to slay as many animals. I smelted much of my iron into some extra backup tools to use for later. I was stumbling upon a vast number of resources like iron that it just seemed almost repetitive at this point. But when things get quiet, it's always spoiled, sometimes by huge floating rock monsters underground. Relatable, right? No? Okay. I was beginning to realize if you want to have fun, don't go into a deep dark cave. It's not exactly free of danger, in fact it's full of it. Day 8. Well, on this day I discovered chupacabras are real, another thing apparently lurking underground. Remember how I said I needed to improve the weak points of my house? Well, apparently leaving open spaces to fill in with glass later is not exactly the best of ideas, because velociraptors, floating phantoms and ghouls, and other terrifying beings just walk up on in there like they were invited in. And yeah, it doesn't usually end so well. Day 9. Also, apparently nighttime brings about demonic evil chickens that try to kill you too. Who would have thought? Wandering around in the early morning under the cover of darkness in a blood moon is not the smartest thing someone with a moderate to high IQ would be expected to do. But there was a beautiful aurora borealis, so I couldn't help myself. But the army of zombies weren't very forgiving. Anyways, can we take a moment to appreciate how unrealistically accurate those skeletons are? I'm gonna call aimbot on that one. Somehow I fled and I found some amazing underwater base, totally abandoned too, just like those faction bases that always seem to get raided on PvP servers. There was some pretty basic farms and resources in here, but I'm not complaining. Free stuff for me. Also, they had some strange affinity for books. Enchantment books were cool and all, but I'm talking mostly empty books. At this point, just get a library or, well, I guess Kindles don't exist in Minecraft. In hindsight, I probably should have just converted this base. It was much safer than mine was. A fact that would ring true as I was basically assaulted as soon as I emerged from the water after leaving, being attacked by a starved dinosaur and murderous crab. Whoopee. However, things started to look up. I meandered my way into some abandoned barn. Sure, it was rough around the edges, smashed out windows, broken floors, the general damage done by youth and delinquents, but after watching enough DIY videos on YouTube, I decided it was a home project I was willing to see through. This would be my base for the long term, after a few repairs of course. Day 10, I vanquished some zombies, slayed some poor sheep for more wool, and generally was a madman, taking advantage of everything Mother Nature so graciously presented to me. Day 11. I spent most of my time deforesting the woods. Probably not my most gracious action for the planet, but I was realizing OCD probably was a real thing, as the second floor of the building and its roof proportion was truly horrendous and it needed patching up. I mean, really, it was not good. Day 12. I found some spooky pumpkins in the forest. Bit too late, Halloween has been and gone now, but I thought it was worth the mention. I guess jack-o'-lanterns are a bad omen because an arrow hit me seemingly from nowhere after I broke them. Pesky skeletons. I worked on the roof, which is dangerous without scaffolding, not to mention mine was actually made out of gravel. Probably not the safest. It's like making a ladder out of sand and using it to clean the windows on a skyscraper. Don't expect to not fall down 50 stories. Day 13. My attic room was now looking rather homely, quite like my real old bedroom. I found some clusters of ore in the woods in a bowl of rock. Quite an interesting accumulation actually. I have to admit I was pretty cruel to the pigs again on day 13. I also stole all their crops from their farm. For some reason there was a lot of these abandoned bases and farms around. I was starting to think I was living in some kind of a simulation, or like real life was an abandoned server. Or maybe I was just playing on some multiplayer game. Who knows? Inception. Day 14. With With more deforesting efforts for seemingly no reason at all but destroying the planet, my wolf and I went through the forest getting some lumber, cutting it pretty close to some dinosaurs along the way. Is that a diplodocus? I think so. It blends in like a chameleon anyway. After nightfall, I journeyed into the four walls of another tower, this time a spooky, mossy covered cobblestone tower to the skies, full of poisonous, creepy spiders and menacing skeletons, stopping me from reaping its rewards. But I wouldn't give up. Not yet. Day 15. Back in my base, I smelted much of the iron I'd gathered in my new furnace setup I constructed. I prepared some other items and utilities and crafted some specialities and some iron tools and combined them with my master craftsman skills and knowledge to create the Paxel, a super tool that combined multiple abilities from the prepared toolset, but I would need another piece to complete this process. I also crafted some wooden hardware and combined them all together to create the Lesser Equipment Forge, a block which I used to craft my pre-prepared parts in to create my first special tool, which was the Paxel. After the usual pig-fueled carnage, I ascended a cool looking tower that I found straight in the middle of the plains in a field. It looked just like one of those observatory towers with the space telescopes at the top. It was pretty awesome. Why do I keep skipping over these cool bases that are already half built for me? I don't know either. After leaving, I was ambushed by a disgustingly large tentacled set of red monsters outside of a sandstone structure. Of course, I did enter, ignoring my better judgment, descending into the deep dark depths. Not always the best ideas, as I mentioned before. At its very bottom, at the foot of the winding staircase, was a dark brick-built labyrinth system full of dangerous creatures. This place was a little smaller than expected though, but its pathways were confusing and narrow. At the top of a hill, I also found a gigantic pillager settlement, or so I thought. Another one of those abandoned civilizations that was shrouded in mystery, with chests full of cobwebs outside and old antique weapons such as bows, and an active open fire pit. Strange. However, inside the actual structure was life. This huge manor was actually full of normal villagers, with a ton of useful offerings that I could take advantage of by bartering with them for trades. Of course, I decided chickens shouldn't be inside, so I had to discreetly take care of those little guys. I mean, who keeps a roost of chickens in their mansion anyway? If I'm entirely honest, I stole most of their stuff, like their note blocks and other assorted treasures, but we'll keep that on low for now.